Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our talk. Today, we would like to talk about Eclipse Theia news and Noteworthy. I would like to introduce Thomas first, who's one Theia project lead. I'm the other Theia project lead. We are both working on Theia, but we also both consulting clients to build tools, some of which are based on Theia. Today we really would like to focus on news and noteworthy of Theia. We focus on the last year, since last EclipseCon. In case you don't know what Theia is, travel back in time, join my talk in the morning. No, but more seriously note, so if you don't know what Theia is, in a nutshell, it's a platform for building tools and IDEs. It's kind of the next generation of the Eclipse platform, and today we really want to focus on what's new. We have really a lot of stuff to talk about. In terms of order, we start a little bit with features and technical improvements, but then we switch over to community updates, process updates, and there are some gray areas in between. So Thomas will start it off with feature and technical improvements, and then I will take over for the organization and process-related improvements. And enjoy the show. Thomas, stage is yours.
Thanks very much, Jonas. So let's dive right in and look at the first thing that came in over the last year, and that's the toolbar in Theia. Why do you want a toolbar? For programmers, we often work with text, etc. But for people who are not programmers or who are not very familiar with tools, it's actually a good way to discover what's there. There we go. Sorry about that. And you can see there are a couple of basic commands here: backwards, forwards, split the editor, search. But we can actually customize this thing and add a command to the toolbar. The one I wanted to do is inline breakpoint, which I can't find. Can you see it? Whatever. The second thing that's special here is that you can actually select an icon from an icon set, font awesome or Codicon here. And we're going to add the plus thing. And it asks us where we want to put the thing. And we're going to put it in the center range. Of course, we can reorganize this thing here, or put it even on the left side here. And we can click it, and the action is happening. And once we're done with that, we can actually just right-click again here. And remove it, or we can also go to the toolbar JSON and, for example, it's a text file, and we just save that, and the command went away from the toolbar. All right, so the next thing we have is actually detachable widgets. And I mean, we all have huge screens, and probably who has more than one screen on there? Yeah, lots of people. And we all confine ourselves to one browser window, and that's a bit of a waste of screen real estate. But with the latest versions of Theia, you can actually, for example, open a new terminal. And you see here in the toolbar, there's now an icon that if I click it, it's going to open that icon, which is not there anymore, in a second window. And I can do everything I can do here. This doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. You'll notice that it has the same colors, etc., like the main window. And if I change my color theme to dark, we actually, the thing has changed its color to here, right? It still works. I hope it still works. It still works. Right. So that's the detachable windows. Right now, it's not a general solution, so you actually have to program your widgets that they can be detached. Early days, right? So for the next thing, we have memory and disassembly views. And I actually don't have a demo for this one, but I should have it in here. A bit of a, there we go. And a lot of our adopters are actually in industries where they work with close to the hardware, right? So just looking at variables is not enough for them. They need to be able to look at memory. And what you can do, for example, is go on a variable here and say, open one of those memory inspectors. And it's going to open on the address. You can also add one manually. You can have multiple of those. And one cool feature is that you can actually freeze the contents of the memory inspector and then take another snapshot later. And then you can diff the two memory snapshot against each other. Very, very useful. Right. So the next one I have, not everything is user visible of the improvements, and there has been a lot of work actually measuring and improving performance over the last year. The one I'm showing here is one where we used to be non-optimal when reading files from a, sorry about that, from, there's an API workspace file system read file, where you can read the file from things, and that was quite slow. And I'm going to show that. I wrote a little extension. That actually does nothing but open a file dialog. There we go. That opens a file dialog and lets me read a file. I'm going to, there we go, choose a largish JPEG, 5 megabytes, about thereabouts. And we can see that takes about 1 second, a bit more. And what I have here in the back is an old version that's 120 from a couple of months ago, and we're going to do the same thing. Yep. And we're going to use the same JPEG. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's taken quite a while longer, actually. After about 10 seconds, or 8.7 here, it's a bit faster than usual, we get the same result, which is a factor of about 8 here. And it depends on the size of the file. The larger it is, the larger the speed up. There we go. Then there is a couple of, where is it now? Here it is. Improvements in the CLI and their adopters kind of had the problem that when you have multiple extensions, Theia extensions, and they have dependencies, sometimes you end up in situations where the versions of Theia that you're using or the version of libraries are not resolving to the same thing, and we improved the CLI to detect that. Oh, that's the wrong one. So I have a bit, and that's actually the code that you can see. That's a demo extension I generated with the Yeoman generator for Theia extensions. And I'm going to invoke there it is, the command called check dependencies. That's part of the Theia command line interface. And it's going to look at that workspace that you're seeing in the back, and it's going to check all the dependencies. And we can see that, oh no, everything is not fine here. Right, so this is now checking all the dependencies. If I just want to see if the right Theia versions are being used, I can just use check Theia version command. And it's going to tell me that I've got 130 and 127 at the same time. And in my Hello World module, I've got the wrong one, because here I have 1.27, and the main package is actually using this one, the browser app, for example, is using latest, which is 130 right now. What else? Yes, and this is all the last one, support for Playwright. Playwright is, you can imagine, like Selenium, but more modern and way cooler. But there's not only support for the running the tests, but also a page object model. For those who are not familiar with the term, that's basically a model of your application, of the UI of your application. Let me just have a look there. And if you look at the code here, can you see that? Large enough? For example, you have the Theia app. There's a class called Theia app, and it has a status bar. So the class structure here actually mirrors what the application has in its UI, and you can program the tests against that. And there are a couple of tests, and this is the page object model, and the advantage is that if you have just trivial changes, you can do them in the page object model, and all your tests will still work. And if you actually change something in the page object model, you're going to have API breakages, and you're going to detect that you need to change your tests, and you know why it's the case. Right, and that's already everything for me. Back to you, Jonas.
Thank you. All right. By the way, about this topic, you might have joined the Community Day session yesterday. Philip gave a more detailed presentation, which was already also recorded if you're interested in the details. Right. Next feature or improvement I would like to talk about. You might have heard, for example, in my talk in the morning, that Theia supports VS Code extensions. That means if you build a tool based on Theia, you can make VS Code extensions a part of it and benefit from this ecosystem and consume the features. Either you already make them a built-in part of your application from scratch, or you allow your users to install them after the fact. The only way, or the reason why this works is that Theia actually provides the same API as VS Code does. Well, obviously, we cannot provide exactly the same API because the API is evolving, right? So we always have to look at new API that VS Code provides and then implement that. And we have improved a lot during the last year here. So first of all, we have a very sophisticated report mechanism now. So there's a website where you find exactly, we see that on the left side, which member of this VS Code API is supported in which version. So you can see that very exactly. We have a minimum version of the VS Code API that we basically try to always support completely. And on the other hand, what we started to do this year is we actually identify popular extensions that our adopters use and focus on the API that these extensions use. These are actually basically the ways how we find out what we want to support. Now you can see here, on the left side, the numbers are not so important, but from a graph point of view, we were pretty constant over the year, and which is still work, because VS Code adds something, we have to support it, VS Code adds something, we have to support it. But quite recently, in September and October, August, September, and October, we actually discussed internally, hey, there are some gaps we want to close, because there are some popular extensions, for example, Java and ClangD were the biggest driver. We really want to support these extensions in the latest version, so let's collaborate. And the great thing about the Theia ecosystem, it actually worked. So there was not only one company, Ericsson, for example, is the main driver, but also other companies immediately started to contribute on that. And we see the result here. So this is actually number of missing API. And we see here it immediately goes down. So that I'm super thankful for that we have such a great community, and they immediately see, okay, let's improve this, and then we see an effect in the statistics. So message is, it's not always 100%. You have to basically test extensions, but like if we look at these missing 8%, a lot of these stuff are already pretty special. So the most popular extensions usually work, because there are some members in the VS Code extension API that almost no extension actually uses. One big change that we did this year is the so-called Theia community release. So you might know Theia follows a monthly release schedule since its beginning, which is super great to drive innovation. So there's one new release every month. You can pick up changes immediately. However, and this is actually great if you start a project, and especially if you contribute new features, because you can immediately consume them. On the other hand, if your project is in a more stable phase, like for example, you already have something in production, or basically you're not waiting for new features, updating every month is quite a schedule to match. The other issues is that there are other technologies, like for example Eclipse GLSP, Sprotty, CDT.cloud, that kind of interface with Theia, and they have to ensure compatibility with every new release every month. So this is where the monthly release can actually become a burden for adopters. And this was reported to us, and we thought about the solution, and the solution we came up with is now we add a second release cycle on top of that. So we keep the monthly release cycle, but we do what we call a community release every 3 months, which is a little bit more focused on stability. So the differentiation there is it has a release candidate which is published 1 month ahead. So actually what we do is for this community release, we take this release as a candidate. We give people 1 month to check everything, to integrate whether everything works correctly, and we apply some hot fixes to it. It has a maintenance branch, so you can fix stuff afterwards, and contributors can actually decide, okay, I'm on version 1.29, I want to stay there, I only need one fix, you can do that now. And we have a couple of third-party technologies that explicitly check compatibility with these community releases. And they publish the version of their framework that is compatible with the community release on our website. So you know, for example, if you're on the community release from September, then you should use Eclipse TLSP 1. Blah, CDT Cloud. So you have like a mini release stream if you want. So we did our first community release in September. We're happy for any feedback about that. So currently, it has just been released, and we hope it is helpful. All right, documentation, huge topic, always boring topic, but we understand that documentation is super important for the community and for adopters. There has been actually a huge contribution of documentation in the last year. That includes API documentation, but also high-level documentation on the website. So the core concepts, the core APIs is documented on the website. There are description about the concepts behind here, the architecture. Of course, it's not perfect, but compared to what we had last year, is at least 10 times more. You can see in the Open Hub considers us to be a well-documented project. Like this is some statistic analysis. Main message here is, mentioned this. About the documentation in general, we know it's not perfect, and the ask to the community is if you get started with Theia and you're missing something, you don't understand something, or you don't find something, please report that to us. It's always difficult for us to identify where are you coming from, where are you expecting something. Please help us with that. We are super thankful for any kind of feedback here. Another thing that we added is a community-driven migration guide. That was also reported by an adopter. That for every new Theia upgrade, potentially, not always, but potentially you have to do something in your product. Now this, of course, the development team always tries to already document what do you need to do if we know about that. But we don't always know because we don't know all the adopting products. Now the idea to solve that, or at least make this situation better, is we have a document that is open for community contributions. That is our migration guide, and we ask adopters, if you find something that you need to do when upgrading to a new Theia version, please document it here so that other people that upgrade after you, that they know what you basically did and what you had to do. So this is really, we want this to be a community effort so that people can learn from each other and increase the efficiency of their update progress. Of course, there are some companies that always upgrade first, that can contribute more heavily to this, and we are thankful for that. We have monthly release blogs since the beginning of this year, so we document what's new and also general news around the feature. These are linked on the website. We have a new resource section on the website, collecting articles, videos, and everything around Theia. We have a very active user forum. So you see some statistics here, but like we have in 1 week we have 50 posts and around 50 answers, 50 users active. If you ever visited this forum, you probably experienced that you get answers very fast, and I explicitly want to thank everybody in the Theia team who spends their time to answering, and explicitly I have to point out Vince again because he's doing such a great job there. So he's really our community forum leader, super helpful. Yeah. All right, next thing I would like to highlight is the Theia blueprint that has been introduced approximately a year ago. That fills a gap that we always had in the Theia project. Theia is a platform, right? And that's really like our primary focus. We are providing a platform that you can use to build your own tools. However, that still means, okay, if you're new to the project, or if you just want to try it out, or if you want to build your own tool, it's very helpful to have some vanilla default tool that is there and that's also provided by the project. And that's what Theia Blueprint is meant for. So it's a template IDE based on Theia. It's something that you can download, install. It has an installer. it just works out of the box. So this is really the thing that you can use to try out Theia. You can use Theia Blueprint, and you can use it as a template if you want to build your own tool, because it shows a lot of things like how to package such an application, how to implement an update, and so on. So it's kind of our eat your own dog food template tool. It is available as a desktop application, and quite recently is also available as an online application. You can just click try online on the Theia website. This is hosted on Theia.cloud then. It's limited to 30 minutes, but you can try Theia Blueprint in the browser. They're hosted in the cloud. Right. Talking about Theia.cloud, that's the technology that I just mentioned. So if you run a Theia-based application in the cloud, or if you want to do that, that means the user doesn't have to install something, but you can just provide an URL to the users of your tool, and they access it and have a workspace to work on. You need some sort of hosting solution, and what this hosting solution does is basically providing virtual machines on some cluster that are the workspaces of the developer. And quite recently, a project called Theia.cloud was introduced that is explicitly focused on hosting Theia-based application. And the demo that you just saw is also hosted on this technology. If you're interested in that, there's a talk tomorrow specifically about Theia.cloud. Same for CDT.cloud, which is one of the adopting projects and one of these third-party technologies that adopt Theia. If you're familiar with CDT, it's kind of the new version of it based on the web. Again, you have to go back in time if you want to learn about it. You can watch the recording, obviously. So that was just before this session. About project health and adopters. We're actually very happy about the current state of the project. So we see some statistics on the left side. So we have a mature, well-established code base, very large active development team, well-commented source code. We have a stable year-to-year development activity, which we consider to be good. If you look at open source projects, you typically have this huge spike in the beginning and then it drops. That's almost for every open source project, because when active development, like completely new implementation is done, you have a lot of commits. In Theia, it's stable, and that's applying for, that goes back 2 years in time. We have 108 active contributors, which is also a huge number. We list the new numbers for every release, so these are the latest numbers. Yeah, and I don't know why I did the right. Yeah, and interesting, we have 200,000 lines of code, which is not much. And the reason for that is, again, we use a lot of other technologies wherever it makes sense to keep the platform slim, to keep it maintainable. And here are the contributors and adopters listed on our website. This is by far not everybody, because or all companies, because only the companies who actually add their logo there are visible. If you adopt Theia and you're not in this list, we kindly ask you to add yourself, because that's good marketing for the project. But I think this is already pretty impressive. And we get new entries every 2 or 3 weeks, so people really join the project at the moment. TheiaCon is a event like EclipseCon, but completely focused on Theia. It will happen end of November, beginning of December. It's a virtual event for 2 days. So make sure the call for paper is still open this week, but it closes on Friday, and there will be no extension. So if you have a topic you would like to talk about, submit something there. And if you're interested in seeing the content and learn more about Theia, then make sure to register and bookmark this site. It's virtual, it's free of charge. Good opportunity to learn more from the ecosystem. And with that, I would like to close it with one question that Thomas came up, and I really like the question. So what's next? So what do we expect to happen in the next year? What do we expect to potentially talk in 1 year from now? Thomas, what do you think you will talk about next year in our new news and noteworthy?
Oh, I think one thing is we'll continue adding features, unique features that no one else has, like the toolbar, etc. And also, I think we'll be much better again with the VS Code compatibility. I think those are 2 things that are certainly going on.
Good goals. Yeah, actually, I would like to mention about the detachable window. if you've seen a previous talk, you know I'm excited about it because it's really so new in a browser-based application to have this detachable window. So I also would expect that we learn something during the next year if we start to really use it. From my side, I would like to see even more improvements for adopters. That heavily includes documentation, getting started, fixing the process. For example, the community release is maybe only a first step. Maybe we can improve something there. Because we expect more and more adopters to join, and every new adopter has some special requirements that we really want to address as a project, and we really want to help adopters. And I would like to close with repeating my ask. If you start with a project, if you evaluate it, or if you start to really adopt it, and you're missing something, you have questions, you think something could be done better, it's really a super open project. All the parties that are currently contributing to it are interested in attracting new adopters, and that's why we very likely try to address your feedback. The only thing you have to do is tell us, so we can actually address it. All right, before we switch to questions, please provide feedback to the session. It will be in your swap card app, so you can do between 5 and 5 stars, I think. And with that, we would like to open it up for questions.
Why do you put that slide saying you have to sign up for a swap card at the end of your presentation? People can't swap card.
Yeah, that's stupid.
3/4 stars.
Any other questions about anything Theia related? Yes, please.
At the CDT Cloud session before here, it was brought to our attention that some VS extensions can't be used in outside VS Code. So in your experience, for licensing reasons, how often do you find that to be the case?
There are some core, like for example, the CPP tools. It's a good question. It's a critical topic that we observe. There are not many that I'm aware of, but then if there are, they are critical. Like for example, the CPP tools. On the other hand, at least for all cases that I've experienced so far, if something is restricted to VS Code and it's critical, there is also an open source alternative because it's critical. But it's not guaranteed that that will be true for the future. So we, like the open source community, has to actively observe this and provide alternatives for the things that actually are made proprietary in this sense. Yeah. That also, so I think there is a BOF tomorrow, Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong, about this topic, which is part of securing the supply chain. It's not only about security, but also about availability of components.
That is security.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
If the project's abandoned, that's a huge security threat too.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, I hope we see it.
And if you don't like Microsoft's licensing of their extensions, you can always talk to them, right?
Well, Microsoft hearts open source.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think you were a little.
I'm a little bit curious about the VS Code compatibility problem, because we have written our VS Code extension, and we want to have it always be compatible with Theia, so those we can use it. And it's a problem that the API for these code extensions does evolve, and so it has a new feature, and VS Code plugin extension uses the new API, and you have not implemented the API. It's often also some problems that say just remove a feature, and it's no longer available in the VS Code API, and it's not backward compatible anymore.
Yeah. So the question was, for the evolution of VS Code extension API, is it the problem that they add something and then we have to add it after the fact, or that they also sometimes remove stuff and we have to follow that? Thomas, correct? Do you want to take it? Should I?
Is your question how you can know whether your extension is compatible? There is actually a tool that you can run on your extension that will look at the code and see what API it uses, and you can check against, I think, a particular API version. Yeah, Paul, you have.
If I may add on that, essentially, the VS Code API, the Microsoft APIs make sure that everything is instantly backward compatible. And so as long as you don't use the newest, brightest, shiniest APIs, and you stick to what Theia supports at some point in time, it will be fine.
Yeah. Just to repeat that for the recording, so the answer is basically, so VS Code doesn't remove stuff, they are backwards compatible, so it's only about adding, the problem is only about adding, and if you typically extensions do not use API that has introduced 1 month ago, like it takes some time for them to use, and so if you quote an own extension, try to maybe not use the very latest, just 1 month old extension API. We are currently, the current version that we are completing is 164, which is half a year old. So it's typically 6 months. And we have some spikes. We even support some newer API if we know, okay, so they're very important. Yeah. Sorry, you had a question too, then we go back to you, okay? Or is it related to the previous? Yeah, then please go ahead.
The easiest way is just to look if it's compatible with Theia, it's compatible with the newest VS Code.
That's 99% guaranteed, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have a question. I have a Theia open right now. Is your plugin available on the VS Code Marketplace or publicly?
Not on the VS Code Marketplace,
But
because
it
it would be only available for the Microsoft products. It's on the
OpenVSX.
OpenVSX.
Oh, you have it already on OpenVSX?
Excuse me?
Your plugin.
Yes.
I have Theia open right now. I can try installing it and see if it works.
Give me a second. SE SecHub like security.
Okay, let's go to your question then.
Sorry.
Very quick. In one of the slides was written that code base is mostly TypeScript. Mostly means that, I mean, the other technologies which are used for the code are the UI related, or are there also lower level like C or?
No, not at all. If it's not TypeScript, it's usually JavaScript, right? There are a couple of things which are just not, yeah. No, it's a Node.js backend and just JavaScript frontend.
Oh, it's worth mentioning, so for your own tool, if you have, let's say, a Java or C-based component, you can integrate that. So for example, if you have the Java language service typically written in Java, it's absolutely possible to start that then from within the Node.js backend. So you're not limited to TypeScript and Node, but that's the default technology in which all the standard features are implemented and then integrate potentially other. Or for example, a compiler, like you don't want to re-implement that in TypeScript, but you can integrate it then.
This approach you're talking about, I was in the CDT session before, so
Yeah.
is this approach you're talking about also the one that you're using to create the debug adapters?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's like three.
So you use Node to wrap native processes, and then you interface with TypeScript using Node. Is that the way you do it?
So you can start native processes or Java, and then you can interface them depending on the use case, for example, via a socket or so. It really depends on use. If it's, for example, just a compilation, you just the easiest integration is you just start it on the command line, right? And then process the output. But the other way really is you start a process and then you communicate between the Node.js backend and this external process. Yeah. But this is all really standard. It's not something special. Most projects do it in some or the other way.
Yeah, it's like the Node standards. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Yeah, please.
Is it also possible to fix the content of the toolbar for the user, or is it always immutable?
It's a good question.
Which I have no good answer for.
So if do you know?
Forum. I'm telling you, forum
From-
is a good place to find out.
So if it's not possible to fix it, I'm pretty sure it's pretty easy to introduce that feature. I have not tried that because I like the
Link to the JSON file. What
Yeah.
I did as an experiment is set that file to read only.
That's kind of a brute
Yeah, I'm
force
not sure I
approach.
like that. Sure, it works. Anyway.
Any other questions? We have, yeah, maybe one more, please.
So for Theia blueprint, you support, or you provide the binary, the package basically, you can download it,
Yeah, maybe I take that. So the question is that for Theia Blueprint on the desktop, we just provide the installer and then the package. And for the question was for the online version, where we have this try now button on the website, which is limited to 30 minutes, where we also provide that the resources behind that, like the container essentially. Yes, and the answer is yes to everything in Theia, because literally everything is open source. That is that includes Theia Cloud, the whole hosting mechanism, but also the container that we run there. It's all there. Yeah, that's really the purpose of these template projects, to really have some, because you can write documentation, but I also strongly believe in just providing a thing that does pretty much what you probably want to do is a good documentation too, because you can just start from there, start to adapt it, maybe change the logo as the first thing, then change the configuration and so on. Yeah. All right. Now the session is officially over. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thanks very much.
Enjoy your lunch.